try to make me feel embarrassed. Their attempts have been in vain, but they tell me I'm the one with problems. They're the ones who are insane, so for those who want but won't admit it, you shouldn't feel like that, cause you could be 20% cooler and 10 seconds slower. Shout it out. I'm proud to be a Brony. Yeah, yeah. I'm proud to be a Brony.
Hello, mares and gentlecolts, my fellow bronies. Welcome to I'm Brony and I'm Proud. I've got Christopher McKenna, a.k.a. Creighton, a.k.a. Keyframe with me. G'day, Chris.
Hello, everyone. How are we today?
I am well, but I'm not sure about the others, but I'm sure the others are well as well.
We can hope they're well on the internet.
We are well. We are well. Oh, did you hear that? There's multiple personalities in my head after all. So, how did you become a brony?
It would have been back in 2010 when everyone started posting up memes about this weird pony show that had started up and basically slapping them on every art site available. And eventually I got fed up with wondering what the heck it was and looked it up. From there, it's kind of been a happy Technicolor downhill slope.
You have to enlighten us. What does that mean?
I originally started off in the furry and anime fandoms, so I was on a lot of art sites, basically. Go on there, post things, draw things, and this art with the My Little Pony stuff kept cropping up, specifically this Pinkie Pie character was just sort of everywhere. And I eventually got fed up of wondering what the heck it was and actually looked it up and came across the winter wrap-up episode, which as far as I know is sort of how 80% of the entire community actually came up to the show. And saw it and thought, oh my god, this is actually a proper production quality on a cartoon that actually looks interesting. Let's see what the heck it is. And I found the Equestria Daily site and a bunch of other things, and it's sort of been a really interesting little focus in what's happening with this micro to massive fandom over the past 4 years. My background is actually in 3D animation, and 2D animation was something that I always wanted to get back into, but had never really gotten everything together to sort of actually think, okay, how am I actually going to put some characters together in 2D instead of 3D, until I saw the show. And they have an absolutely fantastic production quality on it using some very simple methods. Turns out some of my favorite voice actors are on the show. The episodes were well written, and I actually really liked the fact that it wasn't child focused, it was everyone focused. And it sort of really grabbed me in on that, and then I started reading fan fiction, which I'd never done before.
I have to ask, what was the first fan fiction that you read?
Long time ago and a lot of stories. The one that actually grabbed me the most, I would say, was the first story that I ever actually read in earnest, is probably The Empty Room, shortly followed by Fallout Equestria, which I was actually playing Fallout at the moment for the first time, Fallout 3. So seeing the parallels between those two was really, really good. And I've kind of been reading fan fiction on and off ever since, because it's amazing what some of the writers in this community can actually pull out of their socks.
Talented bunch, that's for sure.
Have you ever heard of the term reading them to safety?
Can't say that I have.
Reading them to safety, where you're still reading a story at 3 a.m. in the morning because the characters aren't safe yet, and you really, really want them to sort of, get out of this situation that they're in. Fallout Equestria stories are definitely sort of along those lines. Community really seems to actually like doing that with their stories. They'll either take the happy fluffies of the show, then kind of turn it on its head and sort of turn it into something that we can actually relate to far more as, adults, I suppose.
Awesome. So how are you involved with the brony community?
Indirectly, I'd say, largely because I haven't had the time to really go to meets and all those sorts of things, but mostly I'm an artist. I draw pictures and commissions for people and stuff like that, and doing more animations. I'm one of the hosts on the Act for On Air podcast, which was a furry community focus that a friend once described as insiders on the edge looking in. And it was really interesting when the brony community came along, because I knew a whole bunch of people who were actually kind of very core to it all. Zizix, who's known as Cybe, was the head of the Melbourne brony community for about the first 2 years here in Melbourne, so 2010 to 2012. We were very good friends and knew each other quite a bit. We had first season marathon in Australia ever with him, which was really cool. I also got to know the guys who run PonyCon pretty well. A bunch of the other people on the staff there, I actually helped out with a couple of design pieces. Actually, we all used to live in the same city together back in Canberra, so it's been a really interesting intermingling mix between one side of the table being an artist and sort of behind the scenes tables with the rest of the scene going on.
Awesome. Chris, how did you become an artist?
Good question. How does one become an artist? Okay, I'd probably say it's a twofold question, that one. And this is advice to any aspiring artist out there at all. My father was an architect, so I always had a little bit of a influence of design, and I really like making things and drawing things and stuff like that. Back in the day, it would have been 2002, 2003, I wandered onto the internet and randomly found a number of art sites. DeviantArt and Yerf. And Yerf was this wonderful place where people would draw dragons and werewolves and fairies and all sorts of interesting creatures, but the quality was fantastic. And they actually had an entrance exam, so to speak, is that you had to submit 6 pieces of art, and they had to be a high enough quality that they would actually accept you onto the site. So they sort of had a bit of a tier, and I thought, ooh, I am going to make myself become an art type and make things good until I can get on their site. Then their server exploded, so I never did actually get onto Yerf. I joined up onto the site DeviantArt when it was in its much smaller days and just started doing character art, pictures for people and, weird and wild, colorful things. My partner at the moment, Carnival, who some of you in the pony community might know as Party Popper, I actually met her on DeviantArt and we ended up meeting up and it was fantastic. And you can really make good friends and connections in the community there. So I'd say my start as an artist was definitely, gosh, it would be nice to be famous. But there was a point at which I thought, I'm actually going to have to make a proper decision about improving the quality of my stuff. I'd say that is the point at which I actually decided to become an artist instead of it just being a hobby.
Rightio. You said that you've had a disposition to art and design because of your father as an architect. Did you carry through that interest through school, or was it something, like you said, that you were sort of experimenting and sort of tossing around until you made the conscious decision to push through with it?
Actually, I'm a multimedia designer by trade, is what I call myself. My background is in 3D animation and graphic design. I actually moved to Melbourne to become a freelance graphic designer, but I've been doing a heck of a lot more web animation and video recently. And if someone asks you, what do you do for a living? And you say, I'm a graphic designer, but I also do web, multimedia, and animation, it's kind of a bit of a mouthful. So I've kind of condensed it down, and I've just been calling myself a multimedia designer. So that's actually my trade. That's what I do. I think definitely with technology these days, it's coming about as being a industry that everyone's sort of getting into. It's surprising how good a lot of you are at doing video and animation. I'm really, really impressed.
I totally understand where you're coming from. My mother's an artist, my father's an architect, my grandfather was an inventor.
Oh, nice.
And my great-grandfather was architect or engineer or something. Been in the blood, literally. My brother's also talented in the art space. My younger brother, he's a 3D animator, and he works within the video game industry. And my youngest brother, he's a photographer. And me being Polish, and Poland being home to some of the best cinematographers in the world, listeners, I know I'm using my OC name on the show, but it doesn't matter. So Lucas means light. So I think I was predestined or cursed to be a filmmaker.
Practically got a studio in your family.
The company's called Kosovsky Brothers, so there you go, with me sort of being the figurehead of the organization. So talk to us more about your future aspirations. Are you able to give us a clue as to what the future holds?
Well, I am in the process of getting some more equipment. Recently came into a bit of a lucky inheritance that I was told cannot be used on anything practical. It has to be on something that I was always wanting but never able to get. So in this case, I've gotten myself one of those, you artist people will know, it's a Cintiq, it's a 24 HD, it's basically the big screen you can draw on, and I'm also going to be getting a video camera. What I'm probably going to be doing is web videos and web animations, pony animations, maybe some analysis stuff. Might see if I can do something with Anthony Cannon. He actually lives nearby here and we occasionally chat and stuff like that. We've mentioned doing something before but haven't really gotten around to it. You'll know him as Anthony C. He does the Reviewing His Magic.
Cool. So you're going to evolve into quite the active YouTuber.
That's the plan, yes. Kind of learnt the hard way recently by doing a couple of animations for clients, just what not to do on a project and how not to go about things. And also thanks to the pony show that I was actually able to do an animation for a client last year, which was the Double Rainbow production, which was put together by Flamingo 1986 and a crew there. It was a fan animation that you guys may have seen, and thankfully they actually released a couple of their flash models. And I had to do an animation which was characters that had outlines, but I didn't have the time to be able to do it frame by frame like I would with this tablet that I've got here. So I actually used the design methods that they use for the pony models on an actual production. So there you go. If anyone tells you that pony isn't useful in a practical sense, you can just say you can get work out of it by reverse engineering the animation methods.
top tip for our listeners. If you can take shortcuts, take it. Animation, Chris, I hope you agree with me on this, is a very time-consuming process.
Oh my god, okay, anyone who is wanting to get into animation, think of what you want to make, right? Think of the time frame that you think that's going to take, and then times it by 5. That's the amount of time it takes to do animation. It's horrifically tricky and time-consuming. Any of you animators out there, you've done some amazing stuff. I still can't believe how quick you can churn them out. Clown Prince, for instance. Do you know Clown Prince's work on YouTube?
Not yet.
Crown Prince hand draws all of her animations, I think with a mouse, and she can basically churn them out in a day or two, and it's amazing that she can actually do them as quick. The quality sometimes suffers, but you look at them and you don't care because it's a fantastic pony animation done in like a day. So any aspiring animators out there, just make sure that you've got the time to be able to put into it. I am clearing a whole bunch of professional stuff off my plate before I even get into it, including the video stuff, because I know that if I start, I'm not going to be able to produce anything decent, and that includes things like commissions and stuff like that. So yeah, make sure you've got the time.
Absolutely. And of course, make sure you've got enough income coming in to pay the bills, and person's got to eat, right, Chris?
Oh yeah, eating's important. Make sure you eat. I have a question for you then. I'm going to do a turnaround on the interview here. You've done a whole bunch of these interviews so far. How have you seen the community develop?
Common thread is that a lot of bronies have come into the fandom at various stages. A few people have come in from the very beginning, but most often it's coming in during season 2, perhaps even season 3, discovering like a handful of episodes, and then going back for the whole thing and watching them as quickly as possible, of course. Some come from sort of dark backgrounds. When I say dark, sometimes it's mentally related, sometimes emotionally related, due to the way of living, perhaps. I'm no different in that category, of course. Then we have people who found out about the fandom all on their own, through the message boards, through the forums.
That's something that the show has always done, even prior to the latest generation iteration of it. Those of you who actually do have a look, the amount of pony figurines, they didn't do actively in the show, that's the difference though. The amount of pony figurines that got rebuilt and remade and re-released based upon different things, like, you know, there's the Kiss ones, people would always dress them up and customize them in different things. I think the difference with this season is that that happens in the show. It's very self-aware, references the audience in a backward sort of way. They'll put the little memes, they'll put the little jokes and stuff, and it'll actually end up in the actual show.
Certain examples that leap to mind is where Twilight ends up looking like Solid Snake. And, you know, if you're jumping even to Equestria Girls, you know, the whole traveling between parallel universes through a quantum mirror, which for me was a dead ringer straight out of Stargate Season 1, which for me held my interest throughout the whole film. Some bronies became bronies because they made fun of other bronies, and then becoming bronies themselves because they end up getting curious about what they were making fun of.
I'd definitely say at least a common thread with a lot of people who are really interested in the fandom. I'm definitely talking here about the older fans, not the original target audience. And this is definitely, for me, something I really enjoyed on the show. We get a wash a lot. There's violence going on everywhere. During the time that the show came out, the 99% protests were going on everywhere. Definitely our generation of our particular youth group, bronies are focused on, tends to have hard actually getting a dedicated career, and things kind of seem to be everyone working against each other. And so when something comes along and it's just like, hey, you know what, being friends is really cool, I think it was kind of like a breath of fresh air people were really looking for, sort of an alternative way to be able to say, hey, being nice to people is actually okay.
I couldn't agree more. I mentioned this before in earlier episodes. The show specifically came about almost 10 years after 9/11. It did change the world in a lot of ways, and we still see those changes carrying through. It hasn't helped. So yeah, there's been too much that said, no, be afraid.
The Cold War was a perfect example of you should be afraid of the red threat. There was the Cuban Missile Crisis, big thing mostly for Americans. But there's always been an aspect of sensationalism in the media. Since we have the internet and the information cycles are so much more accelerated, we can not only see that those things were said back then, but they're still being said now. And you really kind of get oversaturated with all this constant sensationalism of be afraid, be worried, these bad things are happening on everywhere. It was nice to be able to just sort of look away and think about something nice for a change. I think that's what a lot of people really get out of the community. Depending upon if you're into the dark stuff, some people are. I've, you know, seen comics and read stories. Though, that being said, I've never read Cupcakes and I don't want to. Overall, the community is happy having something nice to talk and think about and share.
Every brony is as different as each other. I've more or less seen sometimes even the dark side to the community. There's some bronies who I think try too hard, get past the point of the niceness, and they think, oh, you know, I'm going to be edgy in the fandom.
I think that might actually be an attempt to make it more relatable, which is you see something which is sort of an idealistic world with a whole bunch of characters that don't really have anything. There's not really crime. There's not really any issues. It's kind of has the whole issue with the whole Superman complex. And for instance, things like demographics of suicide and depression are higher for fans of Superman than they are for fans of Spider-Man, for instance. Here's a little bit of geek culture information for you guys. And a lot of the reason being is that Peter Parker, who is Spider-Man, is a character who is flawed. Superman is a character who intrinsically can't be flawed. And it doesn't really work as well in the modern world. And so I think what a lot of people do when they try and darken out an aspect of the fandom is they're actually trying to introduce in flaws to make it more relatable to them in the world that they live in.
Which is kind of ironic. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, has been so relatable to 8 million people and growing.
Yeah, and you don't even need the dark stuff. It's just a nice show, so yeah.
The values are strong enough, but then again, you can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want.
That's the interesting thing about Community, isn't it? I mean, characters on the show don't actually have that much depth to them. However, one of the interesting side aspects of actually being a part of the community is that the aspects get enhanced through the lens of the community, and this is things like memes. Derpy and her muffins, the fact that you've got the Lyra character who is obsessed with humans and standing on her high legs. Bon Bon, for instance, because they stuffed up a bunch of the different vocal characters, they had different voice actors for her in different episodes, and what'll happen is through the community, you'll actually get to know the characters more in a way that wasn't intended by the original show. So saying that they feel like an extended family to some people isn't actually that far-fetched, because if you're spending every day dealing with these characters, they're getting enhanced and enhanced and enhanced by the community that you're a part of. Actually going to find out a lot more about them than was originally intended by the original creator. Can you tell I did sociology at university?
Oh, not really. I did cultural studies. I did philosophy as well. I did some fun electives as part of my studies, actually.
If any of you are about to go into university, philosophy is actually a really good one to get into. And surprisingly, I actually did gender studies. It was awesome. It was a really, really, really good course to do. You might actually see some of this stuff in a gender studies class. It's becoming really far more accepted in circles outside of the community. Things like the philosophy and social studies and gender studies and stuff behind the show is really interesting. So good on you, guys and girls, for giving it a go.
The Brony fandom has totally challenged gender types as we've known it, ever.
Yeah, and interestingly, it's done it in reverse as well, is that normally when you think of challenging gender stereotypes, normally think of the minority getting a better handle and even out against the majority. In most of the case of the world, that is females getting a better even keel on with males. However, this case, I think it actually had that effect by taking a majority male audience, and they actually ended up even keeling with the females, which actually made the female audience just as even keel. I haven't really encountered much gender negativity in the fandom at all.
Unless you talk to the families of the Bronies. That's a different story.
Going to these conventions, people will come up to my table and they'll have their kids there. I actually get to talk to the parents. Are they enjoying the convention and how's it been? And a lot of them are saying that stuff we constantly get from the parents is that, it's not quite what I expected, but everyone seems nice and stuff like that. They're wary but surprised by the positivity that's going on and the fact that generally people really don't care. They just want you to have a good time.
It's sort of an example where in the past it was the parents teaching the children. Now it's the children teaching the parents and so on.
Yeah, definitely. Although it's interesting how, and I'm going to branch out a bit here, not just from the pony stuff, there seems to be a increase, and it might be because Generation X and Y are now becoming the parents. There are a lot more parents who are playing video games with their children, who are watching cartoons with their children. Shows like Adventure Time as well are a really interesting example because the core demographic audience that Adventure Time is aimed for is young kids. The show is definitely not aimed at young kids. It's aimed at multiple demographics and stuff like that, much like pony stuff has been. And I think there's going to be a real change probably in the next 10 years or so as sort of Generation Y and younger start becoming adults and parents, that joining in of the kids' activities is actually going to become part of the family instead of the kids going and playing video games and that being something that parents absolutely don't do.
A united form of engagement, like the Brony community that we know it as it is today. Chris, it has definitely been 20% cooler.
I think that's going to become one of the jokes that becomes so old it's new again. But seriously, thank you for having me on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're very welcome. Have a good one.
Yeah, no worries.
Bye. This has been I'm Brony and I'm Proud. Lucky Knight speaking. Thanks for listening. Remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at IBAIPshow. Proud to be a Brony. Intro and outro by Black Griffin. My Little Pony, friendship is magic.
My little pony. I used to wonder what friendship could be. My little pony.